Can everyone hear me okay? The sound system is the best it's ever been, isn't it? And I can actually just relax and talk without having to try to feel like I'm putting my voice out there, so this is nice. Welcome. I'm excited that you're all here, and I have just a exciting update tonight, but before we begin, I would like to invite everyone to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So tonight we have I know one elected here tonight, and that is Bill Schutz. Bill, would you stand up? Bill is with the Dry Creek Joint Elementary School District, so he's one of your representatives. He represents this school. He's on that board. Are there any other folks here who are elected or appointed to a county board or a position like a park district or anything like that? I want to make sure I don't pass over anyone. Okay, thank you for being here, Bill. That was really nice of you to come out. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about my last couple weeks at the Board of Supervisors. We've had some I guess you could say controversial issues that have come before the board, and so I thought I would share a little bit about that, and maybe the rest of the evening we can just do some Q&A and talk about your concerns, whatever you guys want to talk about. But before we get started, I'm going to invite Chris Evans, who is the director for our Antelope Business District, and he's doing, if those of you who may not be aware, when I first got elected in 2016, my very first meeting in Antelope, there were probably 125 people there, and one of the questions that someone asked me was, can you help us figure out how to develop a town center and, how to figure out how we can invite a nice restaurant to our town and to just have more of a feeling of you've arrived in Antelope and help us with economic development. And so that is something that my office has worked on over time, and Vance Gerard worked closely with Chris and others who have set up the Antelope Business District, and it's formalized, and this is the gentleman who's running it, so he's going to give us an update on that.
Thank you. The district starts at basically Alberta and Wallagra and runs all the way down to Elkhorn. The district is made up of about 58 property owners who are all business properties, I might add. There's no residential properties in the district, although they are covered by our zone. They don't pay into the district. Those property owners self-assess themselves a tax for a period of 5 to 10 years so that they could create the district and provide extra security within the zone. We run right now on a budget of about $230,000, $240,000 a year, which a major portion of that is help from the supervisor's office. Without them, we couldn't do it. That $240,000, of that, about 78% in this district is dedicated completely to security. We have security driving through the district in that zone 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. The great news is, because of economies to scale, because you now have this PBID, Property Business Improvement District, by the way, PBID, working with the 80-watt PBID, working with some of the other PBIDs, we've got some economies of scale going. So we are actually going to extend our hours now, starting just before Thanksgiving all the way through the end of the year, and you're going to see our patrol officers out and cruising the streets about 16 hours a day now, on and off. So it's going to give you some extra protection during the time we need it. The biggest thing I deal with every day, you see it on the streets, homeless. Just about, I'll tell you, in this district, about 90% of the homeless are drug addicts. I'm sorry, I know that's not politically correct, but they are. So when you hand them money, $2, by the way, in this district, $3 will get a hit of heroin. And we have people in the district using heroin. We run across their needles all the time. But we have been able, since we started in February, to clean up the 4 major zones where the problems were. You probably all know where they were. They're right next to the tire store, Les Schwab, that creek area. We've cleaned that out completely. It was right up at the end of the street there where we had the trees, that there was a homeless encampment. We just chopped the trees down. And then down by the rental place, the self-service on the self-storage, I'm sorry, we had a homeless encampment in there. And then the last one is down in Elkhorn Center. And we've always got problems down in Elkhorn Center. And I will say there's no crime in being homeless. That's not the crime. What we have to do is when we reach out to people, the very first thing we do is we ask them, what do you need? What can we do to help you? And there are a million programs. Supervisor has been unbelievably supportive in helping us find programs. And so we find programs for the people when they will accept it. I have people in the zone right now. We've had navigators out to meet them 5, 6 times, pick them up, take them, get them a place to stay. They just won't go. And there's no crime in being homeless. If they're sitting on the sidewalk, it's very, 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 very hard to move them along. So anyhow, I don't want to get negative here. We've had a great time. I mean, we've actually improved a lot of zones. We've improved some great areas. I wanted to introduce our newest officer. This is a patrol officer you see on a regular basis. He'll be taking on some of the additional hours. It's Max Hirata. Did I get the name right? Hurtada. See, I'm just going to call him Max. So Officer Max will be joining, many of you know Officer Harris, who already patrols, and then you've got, of course, Dean Broussard, who runs night watch security. And we contract with them, but they work very closely with us. And by the way, all the rest of the money that we use up, the other 80% or 20% that's left over goes to cleanup and advocacy and things like that. So if you've got questions, I've got a lot of information on the back. I'll be happy to give you information. You can get my phone number. If you got a question, just give me a call. All right? My phone number? My direct number is 805-428-3851.
Drug addicts or homeless?
I'm saying 90% of the people I work with are drug addicts. 90% of the homeless I work with. And by the way, if you want to debate it, I'll be more than happy to. But I will tell you, we work with them every single day in 3 or 4 different zones around the city. We do not have a homeless problem. We have an addiction problem. We have a mental health crisis problem. We do not have a homeless problem. If we solve the addiction problem, if we solve the mental health crisis problem, there'd be hardly any homeless. So we can debate that privately. Thank you.
Okay, so a couple of things I'm going to talk about. The first thing I want to talk about is our meeting this last week at the Board of Supervisors. We had a meeting, and before the board was an emergency no-fault eviction moratorium. And basically what happened was a couple weeks ago in our prior board meeting, we had a couple people who came to the Board of Supervisors, and they testified in public comment that they had received an eviction notice in their apartment complex and that they were going to end up homeless because they didn't know how they were going to figure out how to get a place. And they stated that the entire complex had received an eviction notice. It was the Bell Apartments. It was in District 3, Susan Peters' district. And so, and I do want to preface this by saying that this wasn't new to Supervisor Peters. She had been working with all the folks in that complex and working with the California Apartment Association to try to figure out how to assist those folks that were being evicted and to work with the landlord to see if they could offer something to help these folks in their transition. And so at the end of the day, what they negotiated, what the California Apartment Association negotiated with the owner, and I do want to preface the conversation with maybe I should talk a little bit about rent control. Most of you who know me have, or who have been receiving my newsletters know my position on rent control. I don't support rent control. And the reason I don't support rent control is because rent control, economists all over the world, every paper I've ever written, history plays out and rent control does not work. Not the way people think it's going to work. And what ends up happening is instead of putting a cap on rents, it develops a floor and an automatic raise in rents every year after that. And the other thing that rent control does, the people that get in right away, right in the beginning, they get the benefit of rent control. And they're not likely to want to leave. They'll live out their life. They'll raise their kids. They're still living in that house where they have rent control. And they're not really motivated to leave when their kids move away because they have such a great deal on the house. So you don't get the same turnover. And when you put a cap on the income that someone can make, believe it or not, having rental property is like a business. You have to, it's like a profit and loss that you run. You basically go out, and let me preface that by saying in Sacramento County, 44% of the housing units in Sacramento County are tenant units. That's about 660,000 units in Sacramento County. And for every single one of those tenant units, you have to have an owner, someone who's willing to go out and buy that, put the down payment on that project, take out a loan, assume the liability and the maintenance and the upkeep for that property and everything that goes with it. And how they make that work is with the rents that they get from the units. And the rents pay for the costs. And so when you're buying a rental property, the value, if you're going out and buying an apartment complex, the value of that apartment complex is directly related to the revenues minus, the revenues and expenses associated with that property. So properties that net more are going to sell for more because a person can afford to pay more if it's going to net more. So that kind of gives you an idea that when you put a cap on the amount of income that someone can, when you take away the freedom of the market being able to move itself, you begin to cause an after effect and unintended consequences. The unintended consequences are, like one thing that's happening already is investors might say, okay, well, they have rent control there. Why would I buy there when I don't know what the outcome's going to be? They're, basically putting a cap on what I can charge. They're telling me that if I move someone out of my property, I have to pay to move them out. If I decide I want to change the use, they're having minimum requirements on what I have to put back into the property, and now they're beginning to create a situation where they control the revenues and the expenses, and I'm not really sure how this is going to play out. I'm not encouraged to buy investment property there. And all of a sudden you begin to have less availability of housing, affordable housing. And when that happens, the people who get hurt are the people who needed it the most, and that's the people who need affordable housing. So in California, we have a lot of onerous housing regulations that have been passed over the last several decades that have caused the cost of housing to go up. The latest one that happened was the solar. Remember now, all new properties have to have solar. That adds about $10,000 to the cost of a unit. And I can testify that I have had in the last couple months 2 developers who came into my office and said, Sue, basically they sent a letter that said, Sue, we are on hold. We've been working on this project for 30 years and this other one for 20 years. We're on hold. We don't think we can do it. Here's a P&L on this project, each house, and it showed, all their costs for the, building of that house, and their net was basically, they were underwater $4,000 per house in that one. In the other scenario, the one that they'd been working on for 20 years, they were underwater about $40,000 per house. So essentially what's happening is that while we're having, we have a lot of new building codes, environmental regulations, fees. We don't have money to put into our roads, so we're asking them to put that in there. We're asking them to build parks. We're asking them to do community centers, and by the time they pencil all that in, they can't afford to build the house and have it be at the market rate in that location for that place. One of the projects was actually in Rio Linda, Alberta, that they're basically saying we're trying to build $350,000 homes to $450,000. $350,000 to $450,000. That's not even low-cost homes. That's like medium, attainable. I'd call that attainable for an average two people working family, right? They can't even build that. They said the minimum we can put on these is $600,000 to $700,000 homes to make this pencil out, and we just don't think that the market will bear that in that location. We don't think that's a good thing to put there. What you want there is $350,000 to $475,000, basically. So that's what the developers are up against. And one of the other things that they're up against on the infrastructure part of it, when they go in and they buy a property that's not entitled and they have to get it all, the lot splits, and they have to build the roads, and they have to do all this stuff, and then if the project they're going to build there is going to impact the traffic on the main roads, they have to fix the main road in order to make sure that it's going to be okay after that. And so they're expected basically to put in or front the money that fixes these main corridors, and then as other people down that corridor build, then they'll pay back and they'll get some of their money back. But who knows how long that could take? It could be, in California, it could be 30 years because of the way housing is going in California. So I don't know if I'm explaining that very well, but what I'm trying to tell you is that the reason that we don't have affordable housing is because of policy over time that has brought us to this place. Yes? Melrose is a way to possibly help with the situation. In some projects, what they'll do is they'll say, we don't know how we can pay for the ongoing cost of the roads and the community center and this, and so they'll set it up with a Melrose, and each homeowner will pay into that. The good thing about the Melrose is that when you buy a new house in a project that has Melrose, you know what you're buying. You buy into it. But, once you already have a project that, or in an area where the roads are deteriorating, you don't have that private situation set up to manage the situation. A good example is Rancho Murrieta. The people who live in Rancho Murrieta pay for their roads. They pay to their association, and they pay for the maintenance inside their project there. And that's one situation for after it's built to kind of recoup some of the cost, but there's also a lot of millions and millions of dollars required when you just a short distance of a main corridor is millions of dollars on these roads. And so it's a huge expense. And a lot of people have this, they express this anger about developers and these real estate moguls that are making so much money, but the real reality of it is they have to have a lot of money to make these projects go, to get these projects off the ground. There's millions of dollars that's invested just to get it to the point where you can start breaking ground to build the houses, just to get the entitlements and the plans and the financial plans and the water approval on the water and the EIR and all the stuff they go through. And then if people don't like it, they they go through litigation. So it's a challenge in California right now, and the cost of housing is gone up, and we don't have as much housing. We have a lack of housing. And I was looking at, it's interesting because I was looking at a chart. Did you know that Sacramento ranks 58 in low-cost housing starts, multifamily apartment type housing starts? Out of everyone in the whole United States, we're like at the bottom of, the lowest. We're just not getting housing starts. And it's because of, pardon me? We rank, I thought it was 58, but we're very close. We're very close to the bottom of housing starts for apartments, and that is directly related to obstacles to building. So I kind of wanted to cover that a little before I talk a little bit about the emergency moratorium on no-fault evictions. So does everyone know what a no-fault eviction is? No, for those who don't know, a no-fault eviction is an at fault is like if they committed a crime on the property or they didn't pay their rent. A no-fault eviction is where they pay their rent on time, they live up to their lease agreement, and they haven't really done anything wrong. But maybe the owner, after their lease is up, decides they want to have them move out so they can do something different. Maybe their son is coming home from college, or they want to move back in, or they want to rehab it and turn it into 2 units, whatever the case may be. So a note that there are, yeah, let's talk about that. That's good. I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm not going to say greed does not exist. I will say that most people, when they invest, how many of you have financial investments? Okay. How many of you invest that money to make money? Most people who have an investment are doing it to make money. And so I don't think it's bad to make money. So I want to say that. And I will say there are some landlords who are charged. There are those people. I'm sure there's those people out there. So I'm not going to deny that. But what I will say is there's also landlords who are out there who maybe, like the Bell Apartments is a good example. The people who were managing those apartments, Bell Apartments, were a little old couple who had owned the property over time. They weren't really managing it very well. They hadn't kept it up. They hadn't raised the rents. The property, all the rents were way below market. I think they were like $400 below market or something like that. And so the reason everyone was freaking out was because they were calling around, maybe trying to find something at the same price as what they'd been paying, and they couldn't find it because where they were at was way below what the market really is. So over time, they had been benefiting by that and enjoying that. That wasn't a greedy landlord at all. But what ended up happening is they got old. They were in their 90s, and their son took over the property as a fiduciary, and he was trying to invest in the property and fix it up so he could maximize the sale of the property and get the most he could for his parents. And so that was really, it had nothing to, I don't think it had anything to do with rent control as much as it had to do with he was trying to do that. Now, there's others who would have been impacted by the moratorium on no fault. The moratorium on no fault, I'll get you, just one second, let me finish this sentence. The moratorium on no fault means that if you as a owner cannot even though someone's at the end of their lease or they're on a month-to-month, you cannot ask them to leave. There's a moratorium on asking someone to leave your property. And to me, that's a property rights issue. And the state is the one who passed this rent control, and they passed it with a time frame in between. They set up guidelines on what could happen with that policy that will kick in January. But this would basically insert ourselves into some situations. Now, before I get to the second scenario, the second situation, did you have something to say? Did you have something to question? Are you sure? Okay. There was another situation that would have been impacted by this. There was, I know someone who he and his partner owned a couple different apartment complexes. They bought these just closed escrow on these units. And it was like a lot of them. And what they did was they sent out, it wasn't a eviction notice, it was a cash for keys, which is not an eviction. And they offered each of the tenants $4,000 plus 1 month's rent to leave, so that they could, because it was a rundown property, they said this is what they explained in the letter, this is what we do, we buy rundown properties and we fix them up and then we raise the rents. And we want to make it nicer, and we will have to charge a little more once we put all that money into it. It's going to cost us millions. And so we're asking if you would like to take advantage of the cash for keys, which will give you around $5,000 or whatever it is. If you want to move to a unit inside this complex, we can find a unit here, or we can help you get into something else somewhere else. And if you want to move back into your apartment afterwards, let us know. We'll do that too. So those are good actors. Those are good actors who are basically saying, we know we're inconveniencing you. It's our investment. This is how we do our business model. We don't make as much by doing this because we spend money out, but we think this is the right way to do it. Okay? And so in their project, they had 36% of one of their complexes, they had already paid them the $4,000 plus 1 month's rent. They've already left. They've already invested the money in. And if we would have passed that no-fault eviction, it would have been basically put a freeze on. It could have impacted their investment. And they didn't know quite how, but they were worried. This is the kind of thing that worries people who are investing in something to just make sure they're going to make a profit, but also make sure it's in good working order. So I think at the end of the day, the challenge that I had, and I was looking at it from two sides, 660,000 units. Each one of those units has someone who has to be responsible for everything, have all the liability, maintenance, upkeep, and someone who just comes in and is using that home as a tenant, which it's a good thing. It's a good arrangement for both sides, but it has to work. It has to work in a way that the person who's making that investment, that they have some control over their investment. Yes.
Cash for keys, for example, and so on. I don't think the no-fault eviction rule, even if it was just a temporary one that came in, would have prevented that, because then the tenant is choosing to do that. Therefore, they're not being a no-fault eviction. If they're violating any of the lease or any of the agreements for their property, then it's an at-fault eviction and they're gone anyway. I was just thinking that if they had something in place, at least, or you brought it back to the board and says, give them more than 30 days, my gosh, I mean, people a lot of times they have to have first, last, and deposit in a lot of situations, or they're one or two minimum wage jobs just to make it meet, and then at the end of the month they're not having money for food and stuff because they're paying so much. It's hard for them to save up for this and then to move, and I don't know.
You're talking about the Bell Apartments?
No, I'm talking about overall.
Oh, okay. Well, there's hundreds of thousands of evictions every year in California.
For the no-fault for this short span of time, because we're only talking a short span of time, because January 1, 2020 kicks in anyway. And they were voting for something to do now, to protect the people now from getting all these notices to move out in 30 days.
The people who receive those notices, there are laws around evictions, so they had received them. I mean, may have 30 days left now, but they received those notices prior to this. Yeah, at the Bell Apartments. Okay.
The example of a no-fault eviction, where they're saying, oh my gosh, the rule's going to come in, so I want to get you out now. And these people have been good tenants, not violating anything, paying their rent on time, and yet maybe they're on the lower rung of the economic level here where they don't have money saved up to just go and get another place in 30 days.
Can everyone hear what she said?
Yeah. So you've got,
She was concerned about all the people who are, as a result of this rent control kicking in, all these people receiving eviction notices, not having enough time to find another place through the holidays, basically. I think that was the concern that they brought up.
apartments that are getting notices.
Yeah, well, actually, my office I have not had one call in my office for one person who's being evicted in my district who needs help. And every single person that called from the Bell Apartments has been helped. They're still working with one last person. Every other person received rent subsidies and got aid from the county programs to help them get situated. We do not have, I mean, if there's 660,000 units in Sacramento County, the ordinance stated that this was an emergency beyond something. It was like emergency beyond proportions. And I haven't gotten one call of one person in my district being evicted. And yeah.
I know of a few families. I'm going to ask them to call you.
I hope you will. Because we do have resources. We have vouchers and we can help them.
Work if an owner will take it.
Well, the county is offering assistance. So we are doing everything we can to help everyone we can.
If you get something, even if it's a little blurb where they can see it, they're at home and they're going, what am I going to do? And it comes on the television announcing, hey, if you're having this issue, give us a call. We might be able to help. You're not saying you will help, but you might be. A lot of people don't know to call you. A lot of them are not here in this room.
Yeah, so
honestly,
if you know of anyone, tell them. And also, if you know of anyone who is like a senior who's living on the edge, I'll get you in just a second. Have them call me, because we're working with seniors who are living on a low fixed income who are now really scared with this rent control. What happened when the rent control passed early this year is everyone started immediately raising their rents. And that's what rent control does every single time. Rent control doesn't work. It makes the problem worse. And it's rent control that's causing the problem, which I don't support rent control because it's not right. It's just not proven. History's proven that it doesn't work and that it creates a worse problem than what we already have. And I can't imagine why I would support rent control, and I wouldn't support that ordinance. I wouldn't.
But they're no fault. They're a good tenant. They're paying the rent. They're not doing anything. And you need to move them out for whatever reason that's not an at-fault eviction. Give them more than 30 days. Give them time to get it together.
Tina, did you?
Or a list of calls.
What I understood, because we have not received any calls in our district, this was only one apartment.
Here,
It's only two people.
talk loud. So
There was two people that called, so Supervisor Peter started working on it. There was, I think, only 40 out of the whole complex that were having the no-fault eviction. They were given $2,500 plus their security deposit back in full, and they were given more than 30 days notice.
I understand that, but realistically.
But realistically, it's not all over Sacramento. We would be getting the calls.
It's
We're
not.
not.
Okay, let's
Really know to call you guys, and how many people going to help me anyway, so they're not going to make that phone call.
Well, I think, you know, okay, let's move on. I get what you're saying. There are laws around evictions and notices. You have to give notice, and then there's steps that you take to get someone out of your property. So it's not like they got a 30-day notice and they're going to be homeless in 30 days. It's not like that.
This meeting is great. I'm just asking you to please do some kind of media thing where you can let the people that are not here know that you're open and the numbers to call if they may need help.
Yeah, and I did at the meeting.
Don't know that.
Right, and at the supervisor meeting, I did tell them, I said, please, if you are, you know, call us, call any one of us supervisors, and we will do everything we can to, in fact, I'm working with some seniors in Rancho Cordova right now who, they haven't been evicted, but they're worried that they're not going to make ends meet if the rents start going up anymore. And so we're going to try and hook them up with some assistance, you know. This student had a question, and then I'll get to you guys.
To make like an investment in how, you know, they're renovating all the apartments and everything. And a lot of times I've been like, you're saying like, oh, from an investor point perspective, how do you think that affects the other tenants and other people need to buy? Like housing, like affordable housing, but then suddenly it's not affordable to them.
The question she had is when you're talking about these investors who come in and invest in a property and they have to pay more maybe because the cost of housing is higher, how do I think that impacts other people who are the renters? Is that what you meant? Okay, so you are very intelligent because you just got to the crux of the problem in California. We have a housing crisis. The reason we have a housing crisis is we keep adding little laws, little policy, little fee here, a little extra thing you have to do there, a little thing you need to give here, and oh, by the way, we can't pay for our roads and we can't do this anymore because we've reprioritized the money somewhere else. And so the cost of housing has gone up, and when the cost of housing goes up, that impacts what you have to pay for it. And when you have to pay more, then the mortgage you get is going to be a larger mortgage, and the payment on the mortgage is going to be higher. Then on top of that, we have water regulations that say you can't use as much water, so they want us to pay more for the water we are using because the water companies are having trouble with meeting their budgets. We have electric is going up, sewer requirements, we have environmental laws that have caused us to have to spend billions of dollars on our sewer and our water cleanliness. That's causing more cost. We have fires because we don't maintain our trees because we don't want to cut down trees. So we have been over time, you know, we now have because of multiple reasons, not just environmental, but the fact that we have stopped having cattle graze in our forests. They used to help manage our forests. And we've stopped cutting down trees that are beginning to die and hauling them out before they fall apart. Now we have all this biomass in our forests and it's like a dry lightning. It's starting these forest fires. So we have all these problems that are driving the cost of all of our utilities and our cost of living up. The housing is going up. And so with that, that is increasing the cost of living, and how people deal with, how does it impact them? People are moving in together. Some people, families are moving in together, or the kids are moving home. Some people are downsizing into, you know, they used to live in a big house, now they live in a small house. Some people are living in a studio apartment. Some people are homeless. Some people are going homeless because of this. The ordinance was just basically going to say, let's move rent control from January to today and have it go retroactive to any of the evictions that are in process. So if you had filed an eviction like 2 months ago and it's a 90-day notice, you could be impacted by that.
For this, the no fault, to create a no fault temporary ordinance, prevent those people from being evicted. Is that my understanding of it, or am I wrong?
It was an attempt to save a couple of people, because everyone else got. It was one project. It was one isolated project. One isolated project. Yeah. So let me throw out this scenario, because if we had, I'll get you next. If we had passed that emergency ordinance, you know, there is this situation where if you create a situation where property owners who own thousands of units of apartments cannot their income doesn't equal their expenses, they can. No, that what the new rent control is going to do is it's going to put a cap on how much you can increase your rents. And so for those, there are some people, I know I was one of them. I was a real estate investor. I used to own a lot of properties. I don't now. But you make that sound like it's bad, but it's not. You know, but when I owned a condo, I always rented it out. I tried to find a good renter that had good credit, that I perceived was going to take good care of the property. They had good referrals, and I rented it below market always, and I kept it below market. So they were always motivated to stay long. I didn't want to have to change over renters. And so that was my business model, and I had a lot of good luck with that, and it worked well for me. And a lot of property owners have done that over time, but rent control has a way of discouraging that kind of a business model, because when you get in a situation where you are told that there's going to be a cap on what you can raise it, and then you're told there's going to be a minimum requirement on what you have to put back into the property, and then you're told if you want to ask someone to leave your property, you have to pay for their transition out. Now you're talking about that whole P&L has changed. The numbers have changed. It's a numbers thing. It's a business. It's not any more complicated than that. It's a business. And so you have to think of it as okay, am I going to be able to manage it? You know, you have to be able to pay the bills. Did you have something, and then I'll get, did I get you? Okay. Can he go first? Because I told him a while back.
What someone said about people not knowing about this being here. I see it in your Antelope paper every single month. That's at my dad's house. I saw the same article in the Orangevale paper. So I know that if people want to come here, if they want to get educated about what's going on, they need to come to these meetings. And
What if they don't get the
I know
Antelope?
Antelope is huge. There's a handful of people here compared to what's in Antelope.
We try really hard, but we can do better, and we need to do better. So we'll try. Yeah, we will try harder, because we. Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, and you were next.
Yes, thank you for your vote. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I support it. And a couple of comments that you made that, yes, it is a business, and we should treat it like a business. And who of us would want to go into Winco or Domino's Pizza or somebody that owns a local Subway shop and say, you know what, you can only make this much money. You can only charge this much for your pizza or your sandwich or whatever. And if you're that shop owner, you're sitting there, you're dealing with that. Real estate investment is a business. People should treat it like that. The state created this mess by putting in rent control. Whether it was an intended or unintended consequence, they created this. They're the ones that should bear responsibility for whether it's a no-fault eviction or an eviction. They created this mess.
I think you're right, and I kind of resent the B ad that said blame Sue Frost and Susan Peters on evictions this winter, but the homeless this winter or something like that. But I do want to just make a point. Whenever it's the law of economics, and this is so interesting, you kids that are in here. I know you're not kids, but I'm kind of old, so that's what old people say. But if you ever, if you like to read, start reading books on economics, because that gets really interesting. It's the basic law of economics that when you adjust something here, something else is going to change. If you raise the cost of sweaters, maybe less people will buy the sweaters, and the cost of the sweaters will then ultimately go down. I'm probably not saying this very well, but what I'm trying to say is you can't just reach in and fix one little thing without impacting other things.
And the person that doesn't want to work, skips school, gets an F. And you say, well, wait a minute, let's put in some grade control here. We're going to take your A and give you a C, because this person that got an F needs to get a C too. And everybody gets a C. Yeah. That's what we're talking about.
They like to, nowadays they talk a lot about social justice, but you have to ask yourself, what is justice? If you work, that is a perfect analogy, because if you worked for hours studying for that test to get that A, or if you worked really hard and over time saved your money for the down payment, and you worked on your credit and you worked really hard to buy that property, so you had that investment, and now someone can move into, you can rent that property out and someone can move in, and now you can't decide when you ask someone to leave your property? You're the one, it's your property. This is America. It's a property rights issue.
They don't know how many units, but it could have been that many. Well, these hedge funds come in here and they're making huge profits. The reason that we had the economic recession 10, 15 years ago was because they got in bed with the banks and they trashed the economy. So that now the people that are running the hedge funds are making millions and millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And that's just not the way the American system is supposed to work. If it was small people that were running an apartment complex of 50 units, yeah, I can see why you don't want to have rent control. But if you've got a hedge fund, they come in here with their eyes wide open and they're making huge profits. And they deserve rent controls because they are screwing the little guy.
Okay, did everyone hear that? Okay, I want to speak to that. Because I was there, I was in the business of banking at that time, and I have studied this a lot. And what happened with that last economic downturn was directly related to policy that was passed in early 90s, approximately 94, where President Clinton required that Fannie and Freddie and all these lending institutions offer home loans so that everyone could have the opportunity at home ownership. Let me finish, I let you finish. They said, we think everyone should have an opportunity at home ownership. And so they changed the way they underwrite loans, and they made it easier to qualify for a loan. And so people started, and then they started, everyone started jumping in, and they were like saying, okay, I don't know if I can, people actually said, I don't know if I can afford this, but the worst that can happen is I'll just sell it and I'll make $100,000 in a couple years, and how great will that be? So people started, then Wall Street got in on the game, and they started doing what they call subprime loans. And the subprime loans and the liar loans, they used to call them, were stated income loans, where people would say, I make $80,000 a year when they really only made $30,000 a year, and they could just say it, they didn't have to prove it. In the old days, and I was in mortgage for 34 years, we had to prove their income, and we had to calculate out their ratios, and their housing to income ratio had to be 28, and their total monthly outgo had to be like 36. And the subprime loans, basically people were actually buying homes that they couldn't afford. And so what ended up happening after that, I'm almost done. I know this is taking a while, but this is a true story, and it needs to be told because it's important. What happened after that is Wall Street got into the game, and they realized, oh my gosh, they're making all this money. We can make so much money. Let's get into this game and offer these subprime loans. They started offering the subprime loans. And what happened is a couple years went by and people started defaulting because they couldn't afford the loans. And when the defaults started, all these tranches, all these portfolios of loans that were bad, they were in a position where banks were going to go under and businesses were going to go under. So they started mixing the bad loans in with a good tranche of loans. So what they did is they put a few subprime loans into a portfolio of A+ loans so that it wasn't quite such a high risk portfolio. And those portfolios began to be sold into the banking system. And what ended up happening in the secondary market system is it was like a cancer. And at some certain point, the banks started to go under because of all the defaults. And that was the story. And it all started with policy, and it wasn't people who were just trying, it was greed. But let's just tell the story the way it was. It wasn't people who were just buying investment properties to make money. And there are a lot of big investors that are making a ton. I get that. I don't think it's wrong to make money either. It's okay to make money. That's America. It's America. Okay, yeah, you're right. He's right about that. Let's move on. Did you have something?
I know that's also, we can talk about real estate in a way, but I was see what your stance was on Prop 13, maybe if you kind of, it relates to what we're upset about, which is housing. But
yeah, okay, he asked about Prop 13. Does everyone know what Prop 13 is? Okay, it's a protection that limits the amount that our property taxes can be raised in California. And Prop 13, I think, was passed in the 70s. And I support Prop 13. I do not support split roll, which is going to be coming on, there's two initiatives that are coming onto the ballot that I'm hearing that are trying to get on to the November ballot for split roll. I can tell you that what split roll will do is it will still protect the residential side. For those of you who have lived in your house for a long time, you know how great that is. The split roll will basically break off the commercial side, and it will reassess the commercial properties annually or whatever they decide that law is going to be. What it will do is put a huge burden on commercial, on small businesses. It will put a huge cost to the county because 1 year in advance of that, we will have to hire all these people who will have to go out and reassess properties, and then we'll have to basically have two tax systems. So we'll have to open a whole new tax system at the county, and it will be very costly, and it will be another hit. It'll be another blow to the economy and to businesses and to property owners, and it puts them one step closer to getting rid of Prop 13. And in closing to that, I want to say, Prop 13 has kept up with inflation over all this time. It's been ahead by increasing only by 2% each year. It has tracked with inflation over time. But guess what? California is one of the highest taxed states in the nation. I think we're like at 153%. I can't remember what position you seem like you're, I don't know if you know, but we're one of the top, and we still have Prop 13. So what's going to happen when they take away Prop 13? We're basing, and
for the people who are mining
really good point. At the end, it's always the consumer that gets it in the end. Chris, did you have something?
My day at the California Properties Seminar they had downtown, and there was a panel of experts there that spoke for about 45 minutes. Ted Lambert was president of Children Now. He was very supportive of generating more income by rolling back some of the protections of liberty. John Paul from Howard Jarvis Taxpayers was there. He obviously opposed it. Bob Stutzman, the president of Stutzman's Public Affairs, who's a PR person, and Kathleen Blue was there. Kathleen Blue was from Two Edwards. And I will tell you, the interesting thing about sitting in here is this is going to be all about children. This is going to be all about putting more money for our kids. It's going to be help our kids, make sure we get more law enforcement, make sure we get more fire protection. I asked them, there's 200 people there, and I said, how come every time we're talking about the tax, the only people that's going to help us are kids, and every time we pay the tax, it gets diverted somewhere else? And they said, oh no, there's protections in here, we'll make sure that doesn't happen. And I said, yeah, like the gas tax. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you right now, I've got the information, the website is right here somewhere, we've got the videos on thing, you can look it up. They're going to sell this, not as a rollback of Proposition 13, because they know what would happen. They're going to sell this as we're helping the children. And if you oppose this, you probably hate children.
Yeah, so to answer your question, I don't support split roll. I do support Prop 13. And
recall to have you sign this Prop 13 recall or elimination, so we've got to be careful. A lot of these out-of-state propositioners are coming in and teaming up at all the Walmarts. So when you go to sign this recall for Gavin Newsom, be careful signing the Prop 13 because it's actually to repeal. So be careful when you walk up because...
thanks for the warning. Gosh, you really have to be careful nowadays. Yes.
Feels this way, but struggling to only hear one side of the story. I think that split roll is a great idea. I think it's anti-competitive for some businesses to pay so much lower rate than others. There's not the churn in business property that there is in homeowner type property. So yes, the homeowner side of the equation has sort of kept up with inflation, like you say, but not the business property. And one of the reasons we end up having to have things like numbers is that the local community, the cities, the schools, and so forth, have lost the ability to raise taxes, and much of the ability to raise taxes that they had before Prop 13. So now we're going to all these oddball ways, conflicting ways that don't make sense, like some of the stuff that you were talking about earlier with the real estate issues, to try to raise the basic money that we need to keep our schools in good shape and our roads in good shape and that kind of stuff. I mean, I was around, I'm old enough to have lived through the pre-Prop 13 era. It hasn't been good in our state. It's
Okay.
a patchwork way to try to deal with this. The fact that the schools have so little control over their own curriculum is the result of the state having to bail out the local districts.
That's right.
I think yeah, okay. What she's saying is that, well, did everyone hear her? Okay. What she basically is saying, she disagreed. She supports split roll. She felt that the businesses are getting too much of the benefit of that tax savings, and we need more money for schools. And did I get it all? You felt... Having Prop 13 has created a problem with taxation. So I think I respect you. I respect that you're willing to talk like that, because it's this kind of conversation that we need to be able to have as Americans. We all need to be able to express ourselves, and so I do respect that. I will tell you, I had a conversation with someone I know who said, a lot of the commercial property owners are not users. So with commercial property, they rent out their property on what they call triple net. And the way they work commercial property is different than residential. And on triple net, they're basically paying for the cost of the building, the cost of the maintenance and the insurance and all that. And so that's all included, all that is included in their rent. And so when a dress store comes into a retail center to rent a unit, they are only going to be able to pay so much rent before they are not going to be able to make a profit with their business. So they know they have to keep they know what their numbers have to be. It's all about numbers. And so when you do, when you pass on, when you take away that Prop 13 protection and pass on those increased taxes to the owner, what happens is, in the end, in order to get their strip center rented out, they will have to take the loss if they can't get it rented up. And different types of businesses have different amount that they can spend. So what will end up happening is, if they can't make a profit, they will sell the project and they will leave. And that is
strip malls or whatever it might be, are having to pay the higher rate. They're having to pay today's rate in real estate taxes, whereas somebody that's been there for 20 years was on that.
right, and they bought it based on and they bought it based on.
Every time they make an improvement on the property is reassessed.
That's true for the assessed. Let me just, let me also just comment on, I want to comment about our education system. We spend more in California on education, and we have the worst results in the nation. And we have a pension debacle where, you know, we're paying people these pensions, and the pensions are squeezing the services out to the point where I have nonprofits who are calling me saying, Sue, I'm collecting so teachers can have supplies that for themselves for their class, because the school districts can't provide that, can all provide that. So there's a problem with our education system and the way those businesses have built up their debt. The other thing I want to say about taxes and Prop 13, what has happened with Prop 13? What has happened in our state? Prop 13 has not held back the amount of taxes that we pay. We pay the highest taxes in the nation, even though we have Prop 13. And how we not only pay the highest taxes, and how they add that on is they just add little things to, you know, little bonds and this and that. Yeah. And so, and now what's happening, and what happens at the county, we have like 84 different funds where we have to set aside funds because money that we're getting from the state has requirements on how we spend it and how we report it. And it's like the state is, we are like little puppets to the state. We're not running our own destiny. We don't have local control. People talk about it. I think Prop 13 came as a result of a state that has a tendency to overtax, and it was a way to fight back against that. But this is going to go on too long, and we're going to lose the crowd. But I respect. Let's continue that sometime. Yes.
Well, just something else that you were saying, I have to bring this up because I'm old enough to remember when the California State Lottery was put out, and that was all the educational issues, all that money, we would never have to worry about schools ever again. Bottom line, the state they can't take our money, they can't take the California State Lottery money, and they can't budget it, and they can't do the right thing with that as it is. They deserve no more of our taxpayer dollars that we're paying the highest taxes in practically the entire nation. So,
I think there's a definite trust issue with citizens and politicians, and I can kind of see why. Because we put out these tax measures and we tell people what we're going to do with the money, and then we turn around and change what we're doing, and it never seems to fix what we thought was going to get fixed. And so, yeah, I totally hear you. I hear your frustration. Feel it too.
You have to use the money for this. The reason all those rules came into place was because other people were taking the money that the voters raise our taxes to use for this, and then they were taking that money and not using it for that, putting it in the general fund or using it for other things. So now they're saying, well, if we're going to do this, we want you to put on specifics that you have to do this and this and this, which makes it harder to do a lot with the money, but at least they're not taking it all to the general fund like they've been doing for years.
Yeah, I can say the administrative oversight is mind-boggling. It's expensive. The amount of people that we have to hire to, I'm going to take Tina and then you.
They did the lottery and all that money. I actually met a gentleman who had just retired out of the higher education part of running things, and he said, that's the worst thing they can do, because it's all it's going to do is go to the administrative costs.
Yeah.
And I have to say, 3 years ago, I applied for a job with the Sacramento County Office of Education. It was an administrative assistant position. It was with the deputy superintendent. It started at $84,000 a year for an administrative, for a secretary. $84,000 and topped out at over $100,000. I was talked to, didn't get it. I was bummed because I didn't like what I had to work for, but for $84,000, I was going to be able to eat that into it.
We don't make that much in the private sector.
I don't get paid that now, trust me. But that's what I'm saying, is it goes to administrative costs for a lot of these type of things.
Not all folks are good.
That's not entirely true. So what happened with the lottery is in their what was the proposition that said that the state needs to spend 48% of the budget on
Somebody sit here.
It says the state needs to spend 48% of the budget on K-4 education, K-12 plus the community school, okay? So the state does that, but when the lottery came in, it contributed $3 billion. So our state legislator said, oh, look, you're being funded by $3 billion. So they yanked the extra $3 billion from that 48%, and they said, you guys are equal, but they just took the dollars out. So we got no benefit from the lottery. That's really what's happened, is that the state legislator said, yes, you're going to spend this much on education, but they yanked.
Still too much spent at the administrators.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That's a good point. You had something.
I had a couple things that I wanted to bring up for meeting. One was the inequitable water bill that's happening.
Oh, yeah.
If anybody else is curious.
Yes, yeah. I made a phone call because I knew you might come, and I wanted to be prepared. I talked to Evan Jacobs, who's with California American Water, and he said that there are some situations where they have a high bill, but there might be a leak somewhere or something going on, and they can send someone out to from water conservation to do you've done that. So let me say this for they can send someone out. If you want a leak investigation, you can contact customer service. Also, if you're talking about the quality of your water or your rates, there's another number. Tina's going to pass out something that has all this information. And then there's also, if you don't know what's wrong, they can come out and actually do an in-depth review and tell you where you can save money on your water bill or if you have any issues.
I think they can give you an adjustment on that if you can, explain what happened and maybe have some receipts. My issue is.
Was that a statement or a question?
Oh, no, it's a statement.
Okay.
I did it and they did give me a little bit of feedback.
She said they adjusted her bill when they did find the leak. Okay.
There was no leak. We had no idea. They measured the new meters with a phone or something electronically. I personally think because a whole bunch of people had a really high bill in August, maybe that they had just started doing that, maybe there was a malfunction or something. I have my conspiracy theories. But my issue was that on my street, with the end of the cul-de-sac, on my street, everyone has a smaller meter that aren't us. So we get charged like twice as much as they do just for our meter. And
the neighbor's bill was $35. Ours is generally like 200-300.
That's insane. Okay, is your property bigger?
Yes.
Okay,
But we don't water it.
that something's wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know something's wrong. So,
Mr. Jacobs said was, one of the things they can come out and check is the meter and see when the water's flowing. They can tell that, because that could also say if there was leak or isn't. But they can check your meter, make sure your meter's operating properly. So what I went ahead and did was I put a contact sheet together. Basically, it has the customer service number. If you think you have a possible water leak, that is the quickest way to get them out there to check what's going on. They also have a conservation department. That number's on here. They will schedule an appointment to come out and do an in-depth look at your property as well as your meter. And then if you're concerned still about your water rates and your water quality, contact Evan Jacobs. He's the external affairs manager, and I have his desk number, so it doesn't go to just the customer service that's going to send you around to 5 different people. It goes directly to his desk as well as his email, and he will answer any questions. So, anybody wants this?
The other one was the street, the road, the traffic.
you were concerned about when they do Barrett Ranch, the traffic would get worse. And what they're going to be doing infrastructure prior to the houses, and when they do that, there's a couple of street ingress and egress cross streets that are going to be put in that are going to do a lot to relieve the traffic situation. And yeah, we will get Tina's card, and she will give you, she'll connect you with Matt. And then Matt will give you everything you need to know about that. Yes.
Antelope and Don Julio. At the corner, I've been trying to get a hold of the planning department to find out whether they've made the determination whether that's going to be apartments or commercial at that corner. Have they decided yet?
I'm not sure, but maybe what we can do, Tina, can we get Matt to kind of give something on Facebook? Does everyone do Facebook? Do you know the answer to that, Tina? On the corner of Antelope and Don Julio, is there going to be commercial there?
I'm not sure, but I do know one of the things that Matt wanted to mention was we were going to try and have a representative from Barrett Ranch.
Oh, okay, yeah, and also Evan Jacobs from the water company offered to come also. So if you guys say you want them, I can bring them both on the same night, or I can bring them back. You guys want them? Okay, yes. Yeah.
On that Barrett Ranch down the street, and that's the home. So, but I haven't been able to connect with the guy from the Wind, who's the guy who's going to be actually developing the commercial and the apartment stuff. But yes, at the corner of Antelope and Don Julio, it is zoned for commercial right there, that little corner, and also Hofer and Don Julio. There's a little tiny commercial area right there too, that, according to the plans that are approved.
That is correct.
And so, but what the building that's going on right now is just the housing, and that's an arm, and I haven't been able, Matt gave me a name, and the person hasn't gotten back to me on what's actually the plan for the commercial.
We heard 500 homes.
Yeah, that's Lennar. They're under.
Lennar is going to build it out, and that's a good thing, because when they come in and build, they just come in and do it quickly, and it's done. I mean, they're a huge company.
Lennar is great. He's really responsive, and he said that you expect to see those homes available for sale by next summer. But the little corners of apartment and commercial are rezoned by a different builder, and that's the one I haven't been looking at.
Well, we'll bring them. We'll bring Barrett, and we'll bring water, Cal American Water. Now, I've gone over, and out of respect for your time, I can end it, or I can take a minute to just quickly explain the jail, but I don't have to. I can do it next time. How about if we call, out of respect for your time, let's call it a night. Is that what you guys want to do, or what?
I have a question on the
Okay.
the county's thought process on the homeless crisis that they're facing now and what they're doing in our district.
Yeah, the county on homeless, quickly, the county has, in the last month, the Board of Supervisors voted to work in partnership with Sacramento City. We put 1.9, they put $1.5 million in to build some shelters in the River District. There are a whole lot of homeless people in the River District, and they were doing a county winter shelter, and they were busing them out to the outlying areas, to the churches, but the churches basically came to the county and said, this is getting hard. We can't, 100 people, it's hard on our church. We can't do this, keep doing this. And so the county is building 24/7 shelters, and that will hopefully get those people in the River District out of the streets and into shelter and with services. We've also tapped into $100 million of reserves and revenues that we had kind of set aside for programs to make sure we had the money for programs, but we're going to try to get that money out this year. They'll coming out with a RFP for some one-time money that will last 1 or 2 years for small grants to nonprofits that have some good projects that they're working on to help with this homeless situation, to get a handle on it. The county just also voted on a regional, basically a commission, a homeless council that will be a representative from every jurisdiction, every city and the unincorporated county, to have that conversation around the region and homelessness, and we'll be appointing who's going to be working on that. I volunteered, but I don't know if they'll want me on that commission, but I volunteered to be on it. And the heart, we have 3 new hearts. We have the North Sacramento Heart, which covers Antelope and Del Paso Heights, Rio Linda, Alberta, North Highlands, and Antelope. And they're doing awesome. And they're going to do a parking lot sanctuary this winter. And so if you're interested in volunteering, I've been working with them, and they're really awesome. They're doing good work. There's also, yes, I can hook you up, and they need help. And there's also Art Arcade is starting a heart, and there's another heart. Where's the other one, Tina? There's another new one starting. There's one or two others. Well, anyway, South Sacramento and Arden Arcade and North Sac. So the HEART program, what it does is it houses people at night in the coldest nights of the winter, and they work in a volunteer. They work in partnership with the faith-based community, and the county supports it, and Sacramento steps forward, and we basically try to connect people to services. Also, if you know someone who's homeless, who wants to come out of homelessness, call us. We will be there. We also have our Sheriff Hot team. We've just added like 5 hot teams to our Sheriff Hot homeless outreach team. Has been highly effective in developing trust relationships with homeless people. And what they're doing is they're just trying to get to know them and help them whenever they can. They have their phone app where they can do a survey, and they can basically see their movements every time they touch them. They put where they are on the GPS, and sometimes they even communicate with them when there's a crime in the area. They can call that homeless person, because they all have cells, and they can say, what's going on out there? Do you know what happened? And the homeless people, there's actually homeless people that are out there helping our police. And once they develop that trust relationship, they're actually transitioning people in. So that's working. We have we need more housing. And we're working hard to expand our scattered shelter model, which, it's hard to get a big, huge building with 75 people because no one wants it in their backyard, or a big, huge parking lot, tent city. No one wants it. But these scattered shelters we've been able to expand pretty quickly, and they're working out really well. And so we're expanding that as quickly as we can to get more housing just as quickly as we can. We do have one or two scattered shelters in my district. Most of them are downtown Sacramento because that's where most of the homeless problem is, but we also have, each one of the Hearts is doing their own projects, like the Folsom Heart has a house. Someone else, Carmichael Heart, had a church donate a house that was on a lot that they turned into a shelter. So some of the Hearts are doing some shelters, and we also have some ministries. The Way Ministries is got Grace House, and they're working in partnership with the sheriff. And so when someone gets let out of jail, they go into that Way Ministries home, and they're actually helping with reducing recidivism and making sure they get connected with a job. And so we're doing a lot. And we're also, we have vouchers. If we have veterans, we have housing assistance vouchers, and we're trying really hard. It has been harder in California, and actually saw a letter from Ben Carson, who's the director of HUD, who basically said California's vouchers are 30%. We're using 30. We can't use 30% of our vouchers because our housing cost is so high. The vouchers don't do enough to make it affordable. So our housing crisis is actually keeping some of our underserved from getting, even as low as the underserved, from getting help, which is a crying shame. So the federal government did raise the amount that they'll give us recently, and that is going to help. So they...
The federal government reduces the grant money, how much you're going to get for the next time.
Yeah.
I worked at SHRA in those divisions for 27 years before I retired a couple of years ago.
Oh, yeah.
To cancer, so I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
They don't use them because maybe the landlords think they're all bad tenants, you're not going to take them, whatever their misconceptions are out there. If they can't use them and they've got them, the next time the federal says, you're not using what we're given, we're going to give you less money and give it somewhere else. So,
yeah, what's interesting is thank you. What's interesting is that the federal government basically, wrote a letter to Governor Newsom and Mayor Steinberg, because they were asking for more money. And what the federal government said is, your housing policies are causing a housing crisis and causing an economic burden, and it's not, we need you to make some adjustments to your policy that's causing this problem. So the federal government gets it, and some of us get it. And so hopefully, I don't know how that all plays out, but it's out there. Okay, yeah, so that's the last question. Then I'll stay as long as you need me to, but I'm sorry it went so late, you guys.
Do you have any update on the Osh building? I noticed the planning site's been up there for about 3 months.
Osh has been contracted with California Fitness. They are moving forward. They haven't determined whether or not, we've been asking to put in a community room so that we can have meetings a little bit closer inside our the ABC district. But yeah, everything's moving forward. The only weird bugaboo that I heard that I thought was a little interesting was the exit out of the Winco parking lot as you came up past Osh and you were going to go north, where you get that little split thing.
Yeah.
They're going to shut off the left-bound completely. That's going to be completely terminated, and so when you go out, you're going to have to go out and take a left, which means, of course, you have to go out and go down to the U-turn and come back and take a left. So they're working on that issue right now, how they can resolve it, but that's, other than that, they're very excited. I don't know if you notice how fast behind there is. Remember what used to be back there, and if you drive back there tonight, I was there 2 or 3 times today, there's nothing back there anymore, it hasn't been for months.
A lot of it has been pretty much wrong.
Yeah, that was the PBID that the Antelope Business District has done a lot. Thank you for all that you've done, Chris. All right, thank you guys. We had a really good discussion. Thank you all for participating and being here. See you guys. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you came. You know a lot.
I worked at SHRA for almost 27 years before I got cancer and retired. But
I'm very interested in the housing and the homeless issues. We feed them every other Sunday, and now they're telling us we're going to cite them if